season. And I learned about PCA through Jim Thompson's book. And I am pursuing my doctorate in sports psychology right now. And it was the first class, and it was like the best book I've ever read in my life. And I stopped and I ordered 3 copies, and I sent it to colleagues of mine who teach at the University of Akron. That's where I did my undergrad, and I teach there part-time right now. But I sent it to the guy who teaches all the sports psychology classes. I'm like, you have got to, to look at it. And he was obviously familiar with it, but it was one of those books that you stop halfway through and you order copies and you send them out. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, it was really neat. And then I was very lucky. I had someone nominate me last year to be a double gold coach, and I got to go through that process and get to go to a cool awards banquet up in Cleveland and hang out with well-dressed guys like Ryan and hear from Joe Thomas and all that. So it's been really fun. And actually, through sports psychology, I reference Jim Thompson's book all the time. Like, I go back to that all the time, just because I'm a believer in positive psychology and the pursuit of mastery and everything the PCA stands for. I'm about. So yeah, I'm loving this journey so far.
All right, thanks.
Yeah. And the Elm Tree of Mastery, it focuses on peak performance versus winning. And this is based over 20 years of sports psychology research. So if we compare and contrast, the normal scoreboard definition, Kelly asked me when we started, how'd your season go? And I know that the outside world, right, is going to define our success by wins and losses, but I'm more concerned about the pursuit of mastery. So in the scoreboard definition, you look at results, and in mastery, we look at effort. And I think this is very important. I adhere to John Wooden, who said, success is peace of mind, which is direct result of self-satisfaction. Just knowing that you gave every possible effort to become the best you are capable of becoming. And that's what I try to share with the youngsters under my supervision, because I really feel that if our team went out and played a bunch of elementary school kids in a game of football, I think we would probably win. And even if every kid on our team, if they played to the best of their ability, which I think that's the goal of every coach, right? To get everyone to achieve peak performance. If we did that, but we played the Chicago Bears, right? I don't think we'd win. So the pursuit of mastery, we're just looking at that effort. And in the scoreboard definition, like I just said, you're comparing yourself with others. But as I said, sometimes we're going to go against an opponent who's just better. Does that mean we're a failure? I don't think so. PCA doesn't think so. The mastery definition really focuses on learning. I have this sign in my office. I should have brought it to show you guys, but it says, sometimes you win and sometimes you what? Who's got the answer?
Learn.
Yeah, sometimes you learn, right? Everybody wants to say no, sometimes you no, because failure is just the data that you need to achieve success next time. And the scoreboard definition, they're going to say that mistakes are not okay, that you can't make a mistake. And in the mastery definition, mistakes are okay. I share with the kids sometimes, because they get so upset when they make a mistake, and I get it, you've trained for it, but I share with them, it's a game. There's going to be another play, and we've got to get you in the best frame of mind to achieve results on your next play. This isn't the military where one crucial mistake could be devastating. This is sport. This is sport, and we need to learn from those mistakes. So when athletes perform, I got a question for you guys. You're all coaches. You've shared with me that, and when athletes perform, what do you think that they are scared of? What do you think they fear the most?
Their parents.
Parents?
Yes.
Yeah. Why would you say that, Ryan?
I think there's always a passion for a child to impress their parents, and I think the concern is if they don't live up to the expectation of their parents, that they're going to be seen as a failure, and it's going to, oftentimes parents can have a negative behavior around obviously the game environment.
Absolutely.
I think they're more afraid of their peers. They're more afraid of letting their teammates down or embarrassing the team or being the reason the team lost. I think that's more of a pressure for high school kids anyway.
Yeah. And Ruben, do you have anything to add?
Afraid of looking bad.
Yeah, and I think you guys hit the nail on the head. And I think they're afraid of all these things because when they're unsuccessful, they're often screamed at or punished by those closest to them, right? They're screamed at and punished by the coach. I know coaches, we're guilty of that. Parents a lot of times, or their teammates. Let me be clear. PCA is not saying that as a coach, when we see a mistake, we don't correct it. What we're saying is that athletes should not be punished for mistakes. And I think there's a big difference. In moments of peak performance, some people call this the zone. Some people call this, being on fire. We have learned that fear of failure is erased, right? There's that old quote I really like, that the biggest risk in life is not to take a risk. And athletes who are achieving peak performance, they're not scared of messing up. And when that happens, when you remove fear from the barrier, we have learned that anxiety goes down and confidence goes way up. And this is supported by sports psychology, 25 years of research by Robert Roser out of Stanford. Mastery and the pursuit of mastery, because I'm a believer that no one will ever achieve mastery. I just had a conversation with one of the kids on our football team, and I said, hey, Tom Brady, he's won, 5 NFL Super Bowl titles. He's got those rings, but I don't think he ever wakes up and he's like, you know what, today I've got it all figured out. I've reached the top of the mountain. I think what makes the best, the most elite athletes is they're always chasing, the next obstacle. Mastery, it gives athletes a feeling of what they control because it puts the focus on what they control. And again, this leads to confidence. And we know from Albert Bandura's research that when all else is equal, confident athletes will work harder and they will stick to the task longer. And I think that's something that all coaches, those are traits that all coaches desire. The bottom line, from principle to the elm tree of mastery, is that coaches who can teach those under their supervision to pursue mastery, they get better results, plain and simple, because you've got that player who's not afraid to make mistakes. He's going to work harder. He or she is going to stick to the task longer. Their anxiety goes down. Confidence goes up. They learn from mistakes, and they give great effort. So let's walk through a little scenario here. Let's, for the sake of the argument, let's imagine you've got your team. Kelly, what sport? Excuse me, I forget. What sport did you say you coach?
I coach lacrosse.
Okay, we're going to take Kelly's lacrosse team right now. You guys are coming out to play a big game, and you are just playing very tentatively, all right? The opponent, who on paper you're better than, is just driving the ball all over you. What do you think you can do as a coach? Let's take a minute, since there's only 3 of us in the room. Let's just kind of kick the ball around, or in lacrosse terms, you got to help me out. I've never played lacrosse. We'll throw
the ball around. Yeah, throw the ball around.
All right, cool. So what can we do if our team's playing tentatively?
One of the things I like to do is just constantly point out what they're doing well and not focus on the mistakes, because they're probably beating themselves up over dropping the ball or losing their defender, or losing their attack person. And so I just, might be pulling it, like just my cheering on the sidelines is just going to be all the things they're doing well. Or maybe at halftime, I'll tell them like, wow, you got 3 consecutive passes in a row. That was awesome. Or, just really focus on what they're doing correctly.
Kelly, that's awesome. If you don't mind, I'd like to just kind of cheer you on with that. I've read an awesome book by Ken Blanchard. It's called Whale Done. Have you ever read that before?
No.
And it talks about how they train whales at SeaWorld. And it said, you put a rope underneath the water, and every time Shamu swims under the rope, they don't say anything about it. Just like your athletes, they probably know when they drop a pass. And by pointing that out to them, you're not really helping the matter. What they do is when Shamu swims over the rope, they're going to give them a fish and say, hey, good boy, Shamu. So we have a thing we do at our practice. We call it Whale Done. And it's whenever we see somebody doing something good, we recognize it and say, hey, whale done. And we have little stickers and the kids have fun with it. But just recognizing those things that the kids do well. I'm just so encouraged that you're doing that. Does anybody else have any ideas for Kelly how we could get that to play a little harder?
I think a big one is to breathe, and really step back and just take a deep breath, because when you're caught in the moment, you let a lot of those negative and all those thoughts build up at a lot quicker rate. And so, just stepping back and taking a breathe, and then again, like Kelly's mentioned, focus on the positivity and the positive aspects are definitely a huge way to slow down, maintain some pace of the game.
Mm-hmm. It's one of those, we've all heard people say, hey, take a deep breath. And it's actually from a science standpoint, when you take a big breath, like from the belly, a lot of us engage in this shallow breathing, but when you can take a big diaphragmatic breath, it actually does make you feel better because your anxiety goes down. Yeah, thanks a lot for sharing that, Ryan.
I know I already answered, but I have another one that I think really helped me out. This happened to me a couple seasons ago where we were playing in a really intense game and the girls were not playing well at all. And at halftime, I had my assistant coach talk to the team, and she knows about positive charting. So I just said, just keep positive, positive, positive. And I ran across the field to the parents and just like talk to them for like 2 minutes. And I was like, hey, parents, I need your help here. We cannot have any negative vibes going on this field right now. I need you guys to be cheering like crazy for whatever good hustling, whatever good you see happening. I don't want to hear any uggs, any sighs, any disappointment. Everything's got to be positive. And it was amazing. It was like I flipped a switch. Those parents, the second half, were just like on fire. And the whole first half, I just kept noticing every time, we dropped the ball, they were like, oh. And you'd see them like, oh. And even though they know to be positive, they just needed a reminder. And that seriously shifted the momentum in my team like tremendously.
I love it. And it's like there's two dogs that live inside of everybody, right? There's this negative dog and a positive dog. And the one that lives is the one you feed, right? So feed the positive dog. I love it. Good stuff. Ruben, did you have anything to add?
I like all the ideas that have been shared already. I was thinking like try to get my players to focus on executing something that leads to aggressive. So like the sport I coach, volleyball, as an attacker at the net, you can try to avoid the block, which many players do, or you can challenge the block. You can go right after it. And, I think attackers in volleyball, spikers, when they have this mindset that I'm going to challenge the block, they often play much more aggressively on offense.
Thank you guys very much. I love working with PCA because I come out of these workshops and I feel like I've learned more than I've taught you guys. So thank you so much for sharing. My takeaway from this and kind of what I hear you guys saying is that, effort is the key to performance. And when we can erase fear of failure, players are just freed up to play more aggressive. Just some tools that PCA will provide you guys here. If you would, could we have someone turn to page 27 in their book? Ruben, would you mind just reading, once you get to page 27 under that first line, it says maximize effort by rewarding unsuccessful effort. Could you read that for us? I
can paraphrase it because I actually don't have my book right in front of me, but it talks about how one of the most important times to praise your players is when they give the right effort, but the result isn't what they were looking for. So, for example, in basketball, if you're looking for your players to shoot with their left hand when they're on the left-hand side of the basket, when they do use their left hand, you're praising them and rewarding them and encouraging them to keep doing it, especially when the ball does not go through the hoop.
Oh man, thank you. Great memory there. I picked on you. More prepared,
something like that.
Yeah, and let me ask you, Kelly. I'll ask you because Ryan, I know he's muted right now. We'll try to help him out there if we can. When a player on your team makes a successful play, when they make a goal or a great defensive play, how are they rewarded from teammates, coaches, fans?
Most of the time, like most of the teammates that are around them will come over and they'll like smack sticks, like they'll put their sticks up or like high five them. That's usually what we do. Plus the cheering from the fans and everything.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, everyone, even if they're not knowledgeable about the sport, they recognize a good play and they're going to clap and go team go and all that stuff. But I think what Ruben said is just so important as a coach, that when a player makes a great effort, but the results haven't happened yet, and I say yet because that pursuit of mastery, we're going to keep chopping with that. But we need to praise that as coaches. Ryan, I will pick on you here if that's okay. As a coach, how could you praise effort with one of your players if they're doing everything right, but they're just not coming up with the results you need?
I think one thing is really after the game. If there's, if you're talking after the game, I think one thing is creating kind of the hard hat or effort award that's given to not the player that's maybe the most valuable player on the team that day, but the one that put forward the effort, the one that uplifted the teammates around him and really contributed to the overall impact of the game environment.
Absolutely. Those are all great ways. Thank you guys for sharing. And I think that if we want effort out of those under our supervision with our team, we have to praise effort. We can't say, I guess we have to practice what we preach, right? So we have to praise effort, even if the results aren't exactly what we desire. Another thing I like to share with my athletes is just the topic of mistakes. I always tell the guys, let's make a plan for when we make a mistake. And they'll kind of look at me funny. I said, because it's going to happen, right? You look at the guy who won the Cy Young last year. He gave up some home runs during the year, right? It's not like, hey, never give up a home run, because it's going to happen. So PCA recommends the mistake ritual, which the mistake rituals, I mean, all mistakes, they're like a time machine. I mean, when someone messes up, they're thinking about something that's already happened instead of what? They're not thinking about the current play, which is the most important play, right? Ryan, you're a baseball guy. I love to share with everyone that baseball is the only sport where there's a thing that says error on the scoreboard, right? It's going to happen. It's part of the game. So you have got to be able to snap out of that. A mistake ritual it's something, it's a gesture or a phrase that gets players to focus on the here and now, which is the most important thing they can do. So just an example, a player could, if he's wearing like a band like I have on, he could recognize that he's thinking negatively or thinking about the past, and he could just snap it to his wrist and he could say snap, or he could snap his finger, or he could tap his hip, or he could remove his cap, right? A lot of times as a coach, I'm standing on the sidelines in football, and I want to tell those players that, hey, it's okay, let's focus on the here and now. So a great mistake ritual is the term flush it. And we'll yell, flush it, and we have a sign like this. And the player can look over to me in a loud environment and see me doing this, and he'll do it back, and it's okay. Okay, that play's over. I'm going to focus on the current play. Now, if you would, let's all watch PCA advisory board member and New York Mets outfielder Curtis Granderson explain his mistake ritual.
All right. We can pretend to watch that.
What's that?
I said we can just pretend that we watched it.
Yeah, yeah. So that is number 2.
So how would you then, like, how would you finish up with the video and then transition into the next principle? You don't have to do the next principle, but how would you kind of tie it all together and then go into the next one?
I'll ask a dumb question. Would it be stupid for me to like thank him even though he's not there? Be like, hey, thanks a lot, Curtis. And then like
I do that all the time. No, I do that a lot.
Okay, cool. I was going to say I didn't know how you guys felt about that. That's how I would do it.
So yeah, Levi, I think you can do that, and like just as you explained that, the idea popped in my head. Thank you, Curtis Granderson, for showing us that Major League Baseball players use mistake rituals and focus on Elm, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean that's why we show a professional athlete using a mistake ritual. We want people to realize this isn't just for 6-year-olds. It isn't just for 12-year-olds. This is for any athlete that's trying to perform their best.
Mm-hmm.
So
that one too. Sorry, Ruben. Go ahead.
No, I'm done.
Okay. I was just going to say the one follow-up that I share, Curtis Granderson's talking about his college coach that had a little toilet. And I always share, one of the first workshops I did down in Tampa Bay was in the Tampa Bay Rays Stadium. And there was a toilet in the dugout, stuck to the wall in the dugout of the Tampa Bay Rays. And I was like, what the heck? Like, what's that for? And he said, that's our mistake ritual. We flush it. And I was like, really? Like, that's awesome.
Yeah, that's cool.
It was very cool. So even the highest level, they use it too. All right. Well, thanks. Thanks very much. I love it. Like, I'm taking notes like crazy. And a lot of times I say this a lot, but sometimes I'm writing down like comments or suggestions. And sometimes I'm just taking notes. And I have 3 pages of notes here of things I love that you said that I want to use. Cause I'm like, that's great. That's a good fact. I never in my life thought about the fact that baseball is the only sport that has errors up on the board. And I've watched thousands of baseball games. I've just never actually thought about that. Yeah, that sucks.
Yeah.
If that's on the board and you caused that, like, that's crazy. I never thought of that before.
I've never thought about that either, and I played the game my whole life. So, yeah.
And that's good. That's great. I love it. I've heard gymnasts have said, we've had a couple gymnast trainers, and they've said, gymnastics is the only sport where you start with a perfect score, and everything that you do, your score goes lower. So it's actually a sport of people looking for your mistakes, not looking to, you don't start at 0 and build up. You start at 10 and work your way down. And I was like, oh, that stinks too.
Yeah. Well, it's funny too with baseball. It's the only sport where the defense controls the ball.
Yeah.
True. Yeah. Wow. That's true too.
Yeah.
Nice. All right. I'm doing a workshop for the U.S. soccer convention U.S. softball convention in December. I have to remember all this stuff.
There you go.
All right. So how'd you feel doing that, Levi?
Oh, good. I felt good about it. I, tried to put my own little spins on things here and there. Ideally, I think going through an entire workshop, you're able to engage people a little more. I think this particular number 2, I didn't get a ton of, you guys moving around doing stuff, but I felt good about it.
Yeah. If you were to be in a live workshop, how would you have engaged us as a group differently? I mean, obviously it's the 3 of us, but what are some things that you would have done differently if you had a room of 40 coaches?
Yeah.
Interaction.
Yeah. So, man, and that's a great question. Again, as I was doing this, because I know that's something that you guys really like, and CPA kind of like, let's not just give a lecture, let's move around and let's do some stuff. And really the question, just the one scenario was a think, pair, share. So I didn't know if I, should change that up or just because this was my thing. If the whole workshop is supposed to be this long, is that think, pair, share made to just be like, hey, this is a 1 minute, like just with the person next to you, because if we're moving around seats, I didn't know if that would take too long. Like that was my big question going into this. So I figured, I was like, we want to stay on time. We want to get through. So we're going to stick with just talk with the person next to you. But I wasn't sure how you guys felt about that.
It's a great question, and it's a great challenge to trainers to be able to manage time and keep people moving. I always say that we don't want people to move around the room just for the sake of getting up and getting your blood pressure moving. We want it to be purposeful. And if you just think about yourself, how learners receive information, because we're not just trying to give people information. We can just get up there and talk to do that. We're actually trying to change the behavior so that they can impact kids in a more positive way. And in order to do that, they have to have buy-in, they have to have connection, and they have to remember what we're talking about. So if there's a way that we can kind of tug on their heartstrings, make it like, all right, this is important, and then here's how we're going to do it, just by telling them isn't going to make it happen. Yeah. So some of the talking that you would do, like, oh, I got to get through this slide, or I have to do this, or I have to make sure I explain this perfectly, that can be substituted for a really great interactive discussion, or a really awesome story that you have, or a great example that would take the place of some slides that talk about, like, for example, the idea of keeping things in control. Like, do you have a story of your past when you were a player, or of a coach where you felt out of control and you were afraid to make mistakes? Maybe you had a coach that made you fearful of mistakes, and you can draw into that. Or maybe you were the coach that in the beginning put the fear into kids, and you realized that they were making mistakes all over the place. They weren't having peak performance. So a story like that sometimes is more impactful. Or ask the coaches, have you guys ever caught yourself using fear as a motivator?
Yeah.
And a pin drop.
Yeah.
Wow. Just share with somebody, because this is where, we got to be honest here. Share with somebody a time that you used fear as a motivator, and did it work? And just to get them talking, or debating, or, even just to move their butt. Stand up if you agree, sit down if you don't. It's just to get them to discover information on their own. And it's just part of receiving information and having it stick with them. And it is a challenge. It's definitely a challenge. But, I think the best facilitators are the ones that with practice get really good at it, and they learn to make it really purposeful and fun. And I'm not saying that you didn't do that or you wouldn't, but it's definitely a challenge. And I often ask trainers, anybody that comes to a workshop, what did you remember? What was most impactful? What they remember is what they were actively engaged in. And high school kids especially. I mean, if you sit there and talk at high school kids for 90 minutes, they're not going to remember anything.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, I think, Levi, it's really an art, because we do have some that maybe go more into the personal stories, probably too much, and then it takes away from the content. Yeah. Because then they're rushing through. They've got 10 minutes at the end of a workshop, and they're flying through those last slides and kind of skipping content, and you can kind of see the room going, oh, well, was that just not important? Yeah. So it's definitely an art. I think a lot of, and we talk about it a lot, within PCA with our full-time staff. We read a book this summer called The Power of Moments. And so there's a couple things. There's obviously visual moments, which are key, but then there's feeling moments. And I think the more you can put, like, I like the questions that you ask, because it put me in my own experiences and forced me to articulate those in a way that I could communicate them out. And that's not easy to do on the spot, but I think it's really important in that process, because I will remember the question you asked me and the way I thought about it when I leave that workshop. Yeah. Right. And so even if I don't have the perfect answer right away, that question kind of sticks with me, and I think about it when I leave the room. So I think anytime you can paint a picture for somebody, and put them in a scenario, in their own scenario, I think is a huge win.
And you did that really well when you asked me. You made that real for me. I was thinking, gosh, this is my team. And that was an actual problem we had.
For sure.
And you had the group helping me. So that was a good way to make it personal and connected. And what I'll do too, I was just thinking, I have revamped the trainer course just recently in the last month, and I've added some more videos. So I think you probably are still logged into the old one, which is totally fine. It's not that much different, but I have a video that I did of a Double Goal Coach 1 workshop, and it's a 90-minute video. You don't have to watch the whole thing, but you can scroll through it and see when you see coaches like getting up out of their seats and like scroll back and say, what are you doing there? because you can just see some of the activities that I do to take the place of just going through slides and giving information. Like, for example, the Elm Tree of Mastery, when I put up that chart that says scoreboard versus mastery definition, I just put them up on the screen. And I say, anybody ever have a coach that was only focused on the scoreboard and winning? Yeah. Anybody ever have a coach that was really just focused on how much you learned and how much you love the sport and how much effort, and it was okay if you made a mistake? Yeah, I did. All right, can I have a volunteer to come up and be my scoreboard focused coach? Okay, can I have a volunteer to come up and be my mastery focused coach? And I tell them a scenario. Your team, whatever sport it is, you're down by a slim margin. You've got a halftime speech, you're losing. You've got to motivate your team. You've got a 30-second halftime speech. You're talking to your team right here. The first 2 rows is your team. You're talking to your team. The first 2 rows right there. I want to hear your 30-second halftime speech from a scoreboard-focused, win-at-all-cost mentality. Go. And they rant and I can't believe you did that. You made so many mistakes. What were you thinking? I've done it like 12 times now, and I've never had a coach not just get into it. And then
that's awesome.
You ask the people sitting down, how'd you feel? How would you feel going into the second half? And they're like, I'm scared. I'm nervous. I don't know what to do. And then you say, you kind of talk about that for a second. Then you switch and you say, okay, now you are this other guy or girl. You're the mastery focused coach. I want you to give them the same scenario, halftime speech. You're motivating them to get out, but you're only focusing on effort, what they've learned, that it's okay that they made mistakes. 30 seconds, go. And they give a halftime speech. And then you ask the players in the first 2 rows, how did you feel? How are you going to feel going into the second half? And they're like, I'm calm. I'm relaxed. I know what I need to do. I've got goals, focus. So then you just ask the big crowd, who do you think is going to perform better when you go back in? And it's just like, it's one of those things, like, they don't realize it when they're screaming at their team, but when they can sit back and watch it happen, they're like, wow, why would I? It just doesn't make any sense. So it's just a simple example of that's what I do for that slide rather than going through it.
I like that a lot.
And I'll give you the video because it's got a lot of different ideas on it. But for the sake of time now, I would love to hear some feedback from Ruben and Ryan. I'd love to hear, first of all, what did you like most about what Levi did? And then what do you have as a suggestion for him moving forward? So,
sure, I think
Cooper can jump in.
Well, Ruben, I'll just jump in if that's okay. I think the biggest thing that I noticed is just your comfort level with the content. I think you can tell that you live this content. You gave a lot of really good, solid personal experiences of how you've handled different situations with your kids. And so it was very real. It didn't feel like you were reading off of slides. It didn't feel like you were tied to the content. It came across like you live this day to day. And I thought that was really impressive. I think the other big thing is, sorry, a little noise in the background. I think the other big thing is just the way that you can. Sorry.
Hey, buddy.
Little guy's a little fussy. I think the way that that you give examples and again, paint the picture is solid. I think there's a couple things, and maybe it's just not the right time in the process, but seeing more of how can we implement some of these ideas. So a lot of those coaches are in the room and kind of thinking, hey, this is awesome, but how do I do this? And I think that's a really key part of it. But I think the one piece that I really liked about the interactive component is you said, hey, I just learned a lot from you guys. That's awesome. I feel like I learned something from these workshops, because that's very true. I mean, I've been to I don't know how many workshops now, and there hasn't been a single one that I haven't walked out of and been like, oh yeah, that was a waste of my time. And the audience and the way they interact is really what makes those impactful. And I think you did a really good job of hey, you know what, I learned a lot from you guys. Thank you guys for sharing. I'm going to take some of that back to my team too, because this is awesome. So those are my overarching thoughts.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thanks, Ryan. Ruben?
Yeah, what I'll add, because I really think, Levi, you just have a comfortable style leading the workshop. So I agree with everything that Ryan said. One of the things I like the best about what you do, Levi, is I think you do, you make sure that in addition to telling and sharing that you ask, you do enough, the right amount of asking rather than telling. So for example, when you said, there's a saying, sometimes you win, sometimes you didn't finish it. You let us finish it for you, and you let us come up with learn. And then when you asked for what do kids fear the most when they're playing sports, and Ryan said the parents. Some trainers go, that's right, the parents, they put pressure on the kids, they do this, they do that. Instead, do you remember what you did?
I listened to them. I remember that.
And you asked them why. Why are they afraid of? Why do they fear their parents? So instead of telling, you kept Ryan talking and explaining and letting us hear from Ryan for another moment. So I like the ask rather than tell aspect that you bring.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah. Fantastic. I agree with everything they said, Levi. I just like your style. I think you can tell that you live and you breathe this. Mm-hmm. And you're also very educated in it, which is fun. It's nice to know that your background is in sports psychology because you can hear that kind of a thread going through it, and it gives you a lot of credibility. So I like those are the things I was jotting down like crazy because I just think a lot of them are awesome. The John Wooden quote that you read is actually on my wall. So I was like, wait, I know that.
There we go.
That was awesome. But I really like certain just nuggets, like mistakes are data, things like that. Like I haven't heard that before. That's so simple and so easy. And I thought it was great. The idea of the way you were talking about being in the zone, that's like such an overly used sports word. But what does it actually mean? It's where fear of failure is erased. Like I just like that. You just had a lot of really strong statements that I thought these are good. These are the things that coaches are going to take with them and they're going to remember. So I think that was awesome. Also the well done, that's the story from your coaching. That's what coaches want to hear. They actually want to hear, what do? You coach high school football. What are actual things you do with your team? Yeah. So I would encourage you to add a little bit more of a personal component. Again, as I said, something from your past as an athlete, something a coach did for you, something that, be specific. Paint a story of a player that got a struggle. Paint a story of a kid, whatever it is, and how using and living some of these principles has really had this athlete just turn around. And bringing up some challenges, what are challenges the coaches have? And then addressing those head on with, we've got tools, we've got principles, we can help you do this. Because I think the abstract ideas for each of these principles are fantastic. The theory behind them, the research behind them is great. But coaches literally want to walk away with, what do I do? I want to know physically what to do to get better. So sometimes I think we focus too much on the theory behind it and the research and not as much on here's what we want you to do. We want you to reward unsuccessful effort. So just for example there, I put two of the things I said, I want to hear more personal stories and I want you to do some more group discussion, questions that are open-ended. So I think you asked like Ryan or Ruben or one of them, like, how would you praise effort? But I would get them in a group and say, what does max effort look like in your sport? Because sometimes coaches just say, I want to see maximum effort. And they don't even explain to the athletes what that looks like. So what that means is running hard through first base. What it means is getting down low and, running through the ground balls or whatever it is, running back on defense, sprinting back on defense. This is what I'm going to be looking for. So just getting them in a group to talk about effort, how they praise effort, what do they do? And I think that's great. You can mix them up by sport, mix them up by age they coach, mix them up by people they've never met, mix them up by their best friends, whatever you want to do. But every single coach at a workshop, a lot of them, I should say, write down the best part of the workshop is the interaction with other coaches and hearing ideas from other coaches. So I'm just going to challenge you to put more of that in there. I think that would be great. So yeah, other than that, again, I just took lots of notes because I loved a lot of the things that you did. So I'm really excited. And I also, Ryan, I wanted to ask you, so right now we have Levi I put him in as an observer right now for the workshop on the 20th. I don't know if you saw that with Pam Malone. It's a double goal coach 1 workshop. But if he's, if we all give him the thumbs up, which I think we do, I think, Ryan, Levi, I think this format is actually holding you back. Like, I want to see you in front of live people because you can tell you've got a lot of connection to people and you like people, and this is not the best format for you to do it. So I want to see you get out with live people.
Agreed.
line to see if that's all right. Could I set that up to be a co-facilitation with Pam on the 20th?
Without any hesitation, absolutely.
Okay. Congratulations. So I'll send you a follow-up email, if not tonight, because I'm heading out the door actually right now. If not tonight, I'll do it first thing tomorrow morning, and I will hook you up with Pamela, and then you two can just talk about how you want to split that up. So usually I have you do her do half the workshop, or you do half the workshop. She might do the introduction, and then pass it over to you to do emotional tank, and she'll do true mastery, and you can do however you guys want to do it. I'll let you guys set that up.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for your time and just for all that you're doing. And I'm excited to learn, and we'll keep chopping.
Excited to have you.
Definitely excited to have you part of the team, Levi. You'll be a huge asset for us, and you'll really enjoy that workshop with Pam. She's great.
Yeah, that'll be fun. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks, Levi. Congratulations.
Thank you. You guys have a good night. God bless you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.